The Galactic Council chamber floated in the void between stars. A massive structure of crystalline spires and metallic platforms where representatives from 300 civilized species gathered in times of crisis. And this was the greatest crisis the galaxy had ever known. The Vryn swarm had come without warning, pouring through a rift in dead space like a living nightmare. And within 6 months, they had consumed 47 colony worlds and were advancing toward the core systems with unstoppable momentum. Ambassador the Ciscorial stood before the assembly, her crystalline body refracting the chamber's soft light into rainbow patterns that usually signified calm deliberation. But today those colors swirled with chaotic reds and blacks that spoke of pure terror. "The outer rim is lost," she announced, her voice resonating through the translation matrix that allowed all species to understand one another. "Our defense fleets have been overrun, consumed by the swarm, and repurposed into biological weapons against us." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of clicks, whistles, harmonics, and electromagnetic pulses as 300 species all tried to speak at once. Until the Council Prime raised all 6 of his appendages and demanded silence. "We have already deployed every available warship," Council Prime stated, his gray skin flushing darker with stress. "The pacification fields do nothing against enemies that feel no fear. Our stun weapons merely slow them, and they adapt to every frequency we employ. Then we increase production," shouted Representative Moreth from the military caste, his fur bristling with aggressive posturing. "We build more ships, recruit more crews, develop new weapons. There is no time," Thysis Coriol interrupted, and her colors went completely black, which shocked the assembly into absolute silence because such a color meant death or worse. "At current rates of advance, the swarm will reach the core worlds in 90 days. And the capital systems in 150, the weight of that statement hung in the air like a physical thing. And for a long moment no one spoke, because everyone present understood what that meant. The end of galactic civilization as they knew it. "We must broadcast an open distress call," suggested Ambassador Felm, whose aquatic species had already lost 3 colony worlds to the swarm. "Send it on all frequencies, every hyperspace band. Reach out to any species that might help us that would violate the Restricted Communications Act." Another representative objected. "We ban the use of certain hyperspace frequencies for good reason. There are things out there in the dark between galaxies that we do not want to attract. We also quarantine certain regions of space," this Coriol said quietly, and her colors flickered with something that might have been old fear. Including the soul exclusion zone, the chamber went silent again, but this was a different kind of silence, heavy with ancient memory and inherited trauma. "Passed down through generations? No," someone whispered. "Absolutely not," another voice agreed. "Better to die than to." "Invite them back," a third species declared with finality. But Council Prime raised his appendages again, and this time his skin had gone pale, which meant he was about to say something that terrified even him. "I remember the contact wars," he said, and his voice carried across the chamber with the weight of 3 centuries of life. "I was young when humanity first reached out to us from their death world. When we thought we could integrate them into civilized society." He paused, and every being present leaned forward because the contact wars were legendary. Taught 2 young ones as cautionary tales about the dangers lurking in unexplored space, they came in peace. They brought gifts and knowledge and offers of friendship. But they were so fundamentally different from us that merely being around them caused psychological damage to 17 species. "They hunted for sport," someone muttered. "They consumed the flesh of other creatures," another added with revulsion. "They had evolved in an environment so hostile that their entire biology was designed for violence," the Ciscorial said, and her colors shifted to deep purple with streaks of red. "Gravity 3 times our standard, an atmosphere that would corrode most ship hulls, predators that could kill with claws and teeth, diseases that weaponized their own immune systems, and when we tried to limit their expansion, they went to war," Council Prime finished, "not because they were evil or malicious, but because they simply did not understand why we feared them so much." "The war lasted 3 years," Thysis Coriol said, and now her entire form had turned the color of old blood. It was the most brutal conflict in recorded history. And it ended only when we agreed to establish the Soul Exclusion Zone and they agreed to remain within their own territory. That was 200 years ago, Representative Felm pointed out. They have been silent ever since, respecting the quarantine. And we have had peace. Peace bought with shame, Council Prime said softly. We imprisoned an entire species because we were afraid of what they represented. And we told ourselves it was for the good of the galaxy. The debate raged for 6 more hours, with species arguing passionately on both sides. But in the end, it came down to a simple calculation: die with certainty at the hands of the swarm, or risk asking the Deathworlders for help. The vote was close. Closer than any vote in Council history, but it passed. The message was composed carefully, translated into the archaic human languages they had on file, and broadcast on every frequency, including the ones that reached into the Soul Exclusion Zone, to any who received this message. The Galactic Council faces extinction at the hands of the Vryn Swarm, a parasitic hive intelligence that has consumed 47 worlds and advances toward our core systems. We are not strong enough to stop them, and we request aid from any species capable of rendering assistance. Coordinates attached. The message went out across the galaxy, repeating every 6 hours. And the Council waited with growing desperation as days passed with no response. On the 4th day, long-range sensors detected something emerging from the Soul Exclusion Zone. The signal was powerful, cutting through every other transmission. And when it was decoded, the message was brief and in perfect galactic standard, which meant humanity had been listening all along. Message received. The transmission stated in a female voice that somehow conveyed both professionalism and barely restrained violence. Fleet en route. Estimated time of arrival, 96 hours. Admiral Vasquez, commanding Unified Earth Space Service. The Council chamber erupted in chaos as the implications sank in. They were coming. The Deathworlders were coming. An ambassador, who had lived through the contact wars and spent 2 centuries trying to forget, felt her crystalline form begin to crack with stress fractures as old memories surfaced. What have we done? She whispered to herself. But the translation matrix picked it up and broadcast it to the entire chamber. What have we done? Indeed. The outer marker buoys of the Keshan system registered the spatial distortion 3 minutes before the human fleet arrived, giving just enough warning for every sensor array in the system to focus on the designated emergence point. What came through made the galactic observers wish they had never sent that distress call for. The 7 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in a formation so precise it seemed impossible. Each vessel exactly where it needed to be, and the sensors that swept across them returned readings that defied everything the Council knew about ship design. These were not the sleek, elegant vessels of galactic civilization with their smooth curves designed for maximum energy efficiency and minimal psychological impact on other species. These were weapons, pure and simple, all hard angles and armor plating, covered in sensor arrays that looked like predatory eyes, bristling with weapon systems that the Council had banned 3,000 years ago. As violations of civilized warfare, the lead ship was largest, massing nearly 4 times what galactic regulations considered appropriate for a warship. Its hull painted in gray and black patterns that somehow made it harder to look at, despite being clearly visible on every scanner. Admiral Elena Vasquez broadcast from the UESS Indomitable on all frequencies, and her face appeared on view screens across the system. She looked exactly like the historical records of humans from the contact wars. Bilateral symmetry, forward-facing eyes like a predator, facial features that could shift to display emotion, skin in various shades depending on which part of their death world they originated from. This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Unified Earth Space Service, she stated, and her voice carried an edge that made several species instinctively trigger their flight responses. We received your distress call and have come to render assistance against the Vryn Swarm. Council Prime, watching from the safety of the command station 3 light minutes away, felt his skin flush through several colors before settling on pale gray. Admiral Vasquez, he responded after a moment to compose himself. The Galactic Council welcomes your assistance in this time of crisis. We did not expect such a rapid response. We've been monitoring your situation for the past 6 months, Vasquez replied, and there was something in her tone that suggested reproach. We wondered how long it would take before you overcame your prejudices. Enough to ask for help, the comment stung because it was true. And several representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. We request all tactical data you have on the swarm, Vasquez continued. Biological composition, behavioral patterns, response to various weapon types, deployment strategies. Weak points if you've identified any. Council Prime hesitated, because sharing that data would give humanity insight into galactic military capabilities and defensive systems, Admiral. Perhaps we should begin with a diplomatic meeting to discuss terms of engagement in Council Prime, Vasquez interrupted. And now her voice went cold, in a way that made the temperature in the command center seem to drop. We didn't fly 6 weeks through hellspace for a diplomatic circle jerk. Your worlds are burning while we talk. Send the data, or we do this our way. The casual profanity and complete disregard for diplomatic protocol shocked the observers. But what shocked them more was that Vasquez was right. Transmitting now, Council Prime said after a brief consultation with his advisors. The data package went out, and human computer systems began processing it at speeds that made galactic quantum cores look sluggish by comparison. Received and analyzed, Vasquez reported 90 seconds later. Which should have been impossible. We're looking at a carbon-based hive organism with distributed intelligence. Standard biological warfare package, regenerative capabilities, and adaptation mechanisms. That is correct. Council Prime confirmed. Good news then, Vasquez said, and something that might have been a smile crossed her face. We've dealt with worse. That statement hung in the air like a threat. Because what could possibly be worse than the swarm that had consumed? 47 worlds will begin combat operations immediately, Vasquez continued. Human Marine forces will deploy to Keshen 4 to eliminate the primary hive nexus. Fleet elements will provide orbital support and interdict any swarm vessels attempting to escape, Admiral. Our military analysts estimate it would take 3 divisions and 6 months to successfully assault that position. Council Prime objected. Your analysts are using galactic combat doctrine, Vasquez replied, which prioritizes minimizing casualties and following rules of engagement. We don't have that luxury, and frankly, we've never been very good at following rules on the view screen behind Vasquez. Her bridge crew moved with efficient purpose, each human performing their duties with a casual competence. That spoke of years of combat experience. Dropship. Bays are prepping now, reported. A human male with darker skin and what appeared to be deliberate scarring on his face. Marines are loading out for full assault configuration. Environmental hazard assessment. Vasquez ordered. Toxic atmosphere, high gravity, extreme temperatures, and biological contamination across 90% of the surface. Another human responded. This one female with red hair pulled back in a severe style. Basically a Tuesday. Several galactic observers didn't understand the reference, but they understood the casual tone. These humans were about to deploy into an environment that would kill most species within minutes, and they were joking about it. Permission to use unrestricted ordnance, Vasquez requested. Looking directly at the camera, Council Prime felt his skin go pale again because he knew what that meant, Admiral. The Galactic Conventions strictly prohibit the use of kinetic weapons. Incendiary devices, chemical agents, and your conventions failed. Vasquez interrupted again. 47 worlds worth of failure. We didn't come here to fight your way, Council Prime. We came here to win. The silence stretched for 10 seconds before Council Prime made a decision that would haunt him. You have authorization for unrestricted ordnance, he said, quietly acknowledged. Vasquez responded, and now there was something in her expression that looked almost like respect. All units, you are weapons free. Repeat. Weapons free. The human fleet began moving, ships breaking formation and heading for assigned positions with a coordination that suggested they had rehearsed this exact scenario, or more likely had done it before dropships launching in 30 minutes, Vasquez announced. We'll have boots on the ground by local Dawn Ambassador the Siscariel, watching from her private quarters. Felt her crystalline structure resonate with deep vibrations that spoke of primal fear. She pulled up the historical files from the Contact Wars, footage that was kept in restricted archives because it was considered too disturbing for most species. The images showed human soldiers fighting in conditions that should have killed them. continuing to fight even when wounded, displaying levels of aggression and violence that seemed impossible for sentient beings. And now those same humans were about to be unleashed on an enemy that had proven unstoppable. May the old stars have mercy on us all, she whispered. But she didn't know if she meant mercy on the swarm or mercy on the galaxy that had just invited worlders back into civilized space in the UESS Indomitable. Admiral Vasquez stood and addressed her crew. "Listen up, people," she said, and every human on the bridge turned to face her. "We've got a job to do. A lot of civilians are going to die if we fail, and the whole galaxy is watching to see if the scary humans are really as scary as everyone thinks." She paused, and her expression hardened into something that would have terrified any galactic citizen. "Let's not disappoint them." The dropships hit atmosphere at speeds that would have torn apart any galactic vessel, their heat shields glowing white-hot as they plunged through the toxic clouds surrounding, Keshin for like meteors of human determination inside the lead dropship. Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Chen checked his squad one final time, each Marine locked into their crash harness and loaded with enough weapons and ammunition to fight a small war 30 seconds to dirt. The pilot announced over the comm system, her voice steady despite the fact that they were descending into hell itself. Chen pulled up the tactical display on his helmet's heads-up system, watching as 50 dropships converged on the primary hive nexus from multiple vectors, and orbital sensors showed the swarm already responding to their approach. "Listen up, Marines," shouted over the roar of atmospheric entry. "Intelligence says this hive contains approximately 40 million swarm organisms. They know we're coming, and they're going to throw everything at us." "Sounds like a target-rich environment, Gunny," Private Williams called back, and several Marines laughed despite the tension. "Our job is simple," Chen continued. "We burn this hive to the ground, kill anything that moves, and we don't stop until every last one of these bugs is dead or we are ERA." The Marines responded in unison, the ancient war cry echoing in the confined space. The dropship slammed into the ground hard enough to crack armor plating, and before the dust had settled, the rear ramp was dropping, and Chen was leading his squad into the nightmare landscape of an infested world. The swarm had transformed the surface into a living organism, the ground itself pulsing with biological machinery, structures of chitin and bone rising from corrupted earth, and the air thick with spores that would have been lethal to any species without sealed armor contact front. Someone yelled, and suddenly the swarm was everywhere. They came in waves. Creatures that had once been galactic citizens, but were now twisted into weapons of flesh and bone. Moving with inhuman speed and coordination that spoke of the hive mind controlling them, Chun opened fire with his rifle, the kinetic rounds punching through chitinous armor and sending corrupted flesh spraying across the landscape. And beside him, his Marines did the same. Creating a wall of lead that tore into the swarm. "Advance flamethrower up," he ordered, and Private Torres moved forward with the weapon that galactic species considered barbaric. The liquid fire sprayed across the swarm creatures and they burned, their biology designed for rapid regeneration proving to be a weakness as the flames consumed them faster than they could heal. "Advance by squads," Chen commanded. "First squad move, second squad cover." The Marines began pushing forward in coordinated movements that looked chaotic to outside observers, but were actually highly disciplined. Combat tactics refined over centuries of human warfare above them. The human fleet began its orbital bombardment, and kinetic rods fell from the sky like the wrath of ancient gods, striking swarm structures with enough force to create small earthquakes. Dr. Gentle watched from the command ship, her tentacles coiled tight with stress as she observed the human assault through remote sensors. She had volunteered for this assignment, against the advice of her entire species, the Zune being pacifists who hadn't fought a war in 10,000 years. But she was a xenobiologist, and this was the greatest opportunity to study humanity that anyone had been offered in 2 centuries. What she saw defied everything she understood about combat psychology. Humans were fighting in an environment that registered off the scale on every hazard index: toxic atmosphere, extreme gravity, temperatures that fluctuated between boiling and freezing, biological contamination that would kill most species through the smallest breach in their suits, and they were winning target the support structures. Chen ordered as his squad reached the outer wall of the hive proper. "Bring this whole thing down." The Marines planted explosive charges with efficient precision, setting timers and falling back to minimum safe distance. Except there was no safe distance when you were standing inside a living enemy fortress. Explosions tore through the hive structure, and it screamed. A psychic wail that hit every sensor system in the system and made even the human ship's crews wince despite their mental shielding inside now. Chen commanded, leading his Marines through the breach into the hive interior. Doctor Antol's sensors couldn't penetrate the biological mass of the hive itself, but audio feeds from the Marine suits told her everything she needed to know. Gunfire, constant and overwhelming, punctuated by shouted orders and status reports. Contact right. Multiple hostiles. Grenade out. Reloading. "Cover me. Williams is down." "Williams is down? I'm good." "Just got the wind knocked out." Williams' voice came back, slightly strained. "Takes more than that to kill a jarhead." The casual way the humans discussed near-death experiences made Gentle's species-specific anxiety response trigger. But she forced herself to keep watching, keep recording. Because this was important, the humans pushed deeper into the hive, fighting through corridors of living tissue that tried to close around them. Past chambers where swarm creatures were being spawned in grotesque biological factories. Toward the heart of the hive, where the Nexus organism coordinated the entire infestation. "Neurotoxin deployed," Chen reported, as they entered a massive chamber. "Let's see how the hive mind likes this." The gas spread through the chamber. A chemical weapon that the Galactic Council had banned because it was considered too cruel. And the swarm creatures began convulsing as their nervous systems shut down, but the swarm adapted. New creatures emerging that were immune to the toxin. And the fighting became even more brutal as the humans switched to pure firepower. "This is actual." Admiral Vasquez's voice came over the command channel. "All Marine units be advised. We're detecting swarm reinforcements converging on your position from outlying areas." "Acknowledged," Chen responded. "How long until they arrive?" 20 minutes, more than enough time, Chen said. And Gentle detected what humans called humor in his voice, despite the dire situation. The Marines fought their way to the central chamber where the Nexus organism waited. A massive biological computer the size of a small building. Pulsing with obscene life. "Someone get me a direct line to that thing," Chen ordered. "I want to deliver a message." One of the Marines, a woman named Jackson, who apparently specialized in electronic warfare, plugged a device into the living wall and established a neural connection to the hive mind. "You're on Gunny." Chen stepped forward and spoke directly to the ancient intelligence that had consumed 47 worlds. "This is Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Chen of the United Earth Marine Corps," he said, his voice steady and cold. "Your kind picked the wrong galaxy to invade," the hive mind responded, its consciousness pressing against the connection, trying to understand what these creatures were that fought with such violence and determination. "We are inevitable." It communicated in a way that translated to all languages. "We have consumed 1,000 galaxies. We cannot be stopped." "Yeah," Chen replied. "But you haven't met humans before." He pulled the detonator from his belt and activated it. The charges the Marines had been planting throughout their advance all triggered simultaneously. And the entire hive complex began collapsing as key support structures were destroyed. "All units fall back to extraction point," Chen ordered. Double time, people. The Marines ran, fighting their way back through corridors that were now collapsing around them. As the hive mind screamed its rage and desperation across every frequency, they burst from the hive just as orbital. Weapons locked onto the structure, and kinetic rods began falling from the sky. Each one hitting with the force of a tactical nuclear weapon. The Marines dove for cover as the hive exploded in a fireball visible from orbit. The Nexus organism destroyed, and with it the coordination for millions of swarm creatures across the planet. "All units report." Chen called as he pulled himself from the rubble one by one. His Marines checked in. "Battered and exhausted, but alive. Mission accomplished." Chen reported to Admiral Vasquez. "Primary hive is destroyed. Recommend follow-up operations to eliminate remaining swarm presence." "Acknowledged," Vasquez responded. "And well done, Marines. The whole galaxy just watched you do in 6 hours what we couldn't do in 6 months. Dr. Gentle sat in silence, her tentacles trembling as she processed what she had witnessed. The humans hadn't just fought the swarm, they had dominated it. using weapons and tactics that were considered barbaric but were undeniably effective. The most terrifying part was the realization that they had been holding back. That this level of violence was considered routine by human standards. She began writing her report, knowing that it would change everything the galaxy thought it understood about the species they had quarantined 2 centuries ago. The Deathworlders had returned, and nothing would ever be the same. 72 hours after the assault on Keshan 4 began, Admiral Vasquez stood in the command center of the UESS, indomitable, and reviewed the tactical reports with satisfaction. The primary hive was destroyed. Secondary nests had been eliminated by marine assault teams. An orbital bombardment had sterilized 90% of the remaining swarm presence on the planet. Human casualties were remarkably light by Earth standards. 43 dead. 217 wounded. Though by galactic standards these numbers represented a catastrophic loss of life fleet status. Vasquez ordered all ships operational, her executive officer reported. Minor damage to 3 vessels from swarm biological weapons, but nothing that affects combat capability. Good, Vasquez said, pulling up the strategic map that showed 3 more worlds infected by the swarm. Prep the fleet for immediate departure. We move on Theta designation 7 in 6 hours, Admiral? Council Prime's voice interrupted over the communication channel. The Galactic Council requests your presence for a formal debriefing. Negative, Vasquez replied without hesitation. We have 3 more targets to hit while the swarm is still reeling from our first strike. Debriefings can wait until the job is done, Admiral. This is not a request, Council Prime insisted, his tone taking on what he probably thought was authority. Then, it's a bad order, Vasquez responded flatly. And I'm ignoring it. She cut the channel before he could respond and turned to her crew. Let's finish this. The human fleet moved with devastating efficiency, hitting each infected world with the same brutal tactics that had worked on Keshan 4, and within 2 weeks, the Vryn swarm presence in galactic space had been reduced to scattered remnants that posed no strategic threat. The Galactic Council watched through remote sensors, and what they saw would fuel debates for decades. Humans using weapons that violated 12 different conventions on warfare, Marines deploying into environments that should have killed them, tactics that prioritize speed and overwhelming force over minimizing casualties, and most disturbing of all, the casual way humans accepted death as simply part of the job. Dr. Gentall compiled her observations into a comprehensive report that circulated through the galactic scientific community and caused widespread controversy. Human biology is fundamentally adapted for persistence hunting, she wrote. Their endurance exceeds any known species, their pain tolerance is extraordinary, and their psychological makeup allows them to function effectively under stress levels that would incapacitate most sentient beings. More concerning, she continued, is their cultural relationship with violence. Humans do not fight to survive, they fight to win. And they have developed this approach over thousands of years of constant warfare on their homeworld. They are not monsters, she concluded, but they are dangerous in ways that civilized species cannot comprehend, because they come from a world where being dangerous was the only way to survive. The report reached the Galactic Council just as Admiral Vasquez's fleet returned to the rally point, and Council Prime immediately demanded she attend a formal session. This time Vasquez agreed, but only after all her ships were resupplied and her Marines had received proper rest. She arrived at the council chamber flanked by an honor guard of Marines in full dress uniform, and the sight of armed humans in the heart of galactic government made several representatives visibly uncomfortable. Admiral Vasquez, Council Prime began, his skin tone carefully neutral. The Galactic Council wishes to thank you for your assistance in eliminating the Vryn swarm threat. You're welcome, Vasquez replied, standing at attention in a way that somehow managed to be both respectful and challenging. However, Council Prime continued, we must address the methods used during your operations. He activated a holographic display that showed footage from the battles, carefully edited to emphasize the most violent aspects: flamethrowers burning, swarm creatures alive, chemical weapons dissolving biological matter, kinetic bombardments that left craters visible from orbit, Marines fighting hand-to-hand when ammunition ran low, using knives and even bare hands to kill. These tactics violate numerous galactic conventions on civilized warfare. Council Prime stated your conventions didn't stop the swarm, Vasquez pointed out. My Marines did at what cost? Ambassador the Scoriel spoke up, her crystalline form pulsing with agitated colors. You saved millions of lives, yes, but your methods were barbaric, cruel. Fundamentally at odds with everything civilized society stands for. Would you prefer we had let the swarm consume those worlds? Vasquez asked, her tone dangerously quiet. We would prefer you had found a way to achieve victory without such violence. Another representative suggested. Vasquez was silent for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried across the chamber with undeniable force. You called us monsters when we first made contact, she began. You were horrified by our biology, our culture, our very existence. And you quarantined us like we were a disease. You called us monsters when we asked to join your civilization. When we offered friendship and trade and cooperation, because we didn't fit your definition of what sentient beings should be, and now you call us monsters because we fought for you. Because we saved your worlds using the only methods that actually work against an enemy like the swarm. She stepped forward, and several representatives instinctively moved back. Tell me, Council, Vasquez continued. What exactly were we supposed to be when you called for help? You wanted us to solve your problem, but you wanted us to do it in a way that made you comfortable. That didn't challenge your beliefs about how warfare should be conducted. That's not possible, she stated flatly. You can't have it both ways. Either you want us to win, or you want us to follow your rules. And your rules don't work against enemies that don't care about being civilized. Council Prime's skin flushed through several colors before settling on dark gray. What happens now? He asked quietly. Now we leave. Vasquez replied, the swarm is broken, but not destroyed. Scattered elements will continue to pose a threat. So we're providing you with complete tactical data on anti-swarm warfare. She activated her datapad and began transmitting files as biological countermeasures. Weapon specifications optimized for fighting hive organisms. Tactical doctrine for assaulting fortified positions. Everything my people learned from 3 weeks of combat, we're giving you this for free, she continued. No trade agreements, no political concessions. No strings attached. Why? Thesis Coriel asked. Genuinely confused because it's the right thing to do, Vasquez said simply. And because if the swarm comes back, and you're not prepared, more people will die, the swarm will return, Council Prime stated. And it wasn't a question probably, Vasquez agreed. This was just a scouting force. The main hive is still out there somewhere in deep space. And when they realize what happened here, they'll come back stronger. The chamber erupted in alarmed sounds from 300 species, which is why you need to be ready, Vasquez said. Raising her voice over the commotion, build better weapons, train harder. Except that sometimes violence is the only answer to violence, and if we're not ready when they return, Representative asked. Will humanity answer another call for help? Vasquez met his eyes, and there was something ancient and tired in her expression. We came when you called this time, she said. Even though you rejected us, even though you locked us away and treated us like a threat. We came because you needed help, and that was enough if you call again. We'll answer, she continued, not because we want your approval or your gratitude, but because it's who we are. We're the ones who run toward danger while everyone else runs away. We're the ones who do what needs to be done regardless of the cost. We're the Deathworlders you fear and the saviors you need. She straightened and saluted the council in the formal. Military style, the USS fleet will be departing in 6 hours, she announced. It's been an honor serving with you, even if most of you wish we hadn't needed to. Vasquez turned and left the chamber, her Marine honor guard following in perfect formation, and the council was left in silence. It was Ambassador de Siscariel who finally spoke. What have we become? She asked quietly. When we need monsters to save us from monsters, perhaps the question, Council Prime suggested, is whether they are truly the monsters, or if we are foreseeing them that way. The debate would rage for months, with some species pushing for full integration of humanity into galactic society, while others lobbied to strengthen the soul exclusion zone and ensure that Deathworlders could never threaten civilized space. But one thing was certain, the galaxy had changed, and humanity's place in it would never be the same on the Indomitable. Admiral Vasquez stood before the Human Defense Council. via quantum communication and gave her final report: mission accomplished. She stated, "The swarm is neutralized. Casualties were acceptable. And we've provided the Council with everything they need to defend themselves. Good work, Admiral," Secretary of Defense responded. "What's your assessment of the political situation?" "They're scared of us," Aska said bluntly, "and they're grateful. And they don't know how to reconcile those feelings." "Recommendations: we maintain the quarantine for now," Aska's advised. "Give them time to process what happened. Let them come to us when they're ready, and if they're never ready." 6 months after the Battle of Keshin 4 ended, the Galactic Council remained, divided in ways that threatened to tear apart an alliance that had stood for 10,000 years. The debate over humanity's role in galactic civilization consumed political discourse across 300 species, with passionate advocates on both sides presenting their arguments to populations that watched nervously from worlds that had been saved by the very beings they feared. These Escorials stood before a committee hearing on the human question, her crystalline form still bearing stress fractures from the crisis, and presented her final assessment. "We face a fundamental choice," she began. "Do we integrate humanity into our civilization and accept all that entails? Or do we maintain the quarantine and accept that we may need them again, but keep them at arm's length?" The integration faction argues that humanity has proven themselves, that they answered our call and saved billions of lives, that excluding them is both ungrateful and strategically foolish. The isolation faction argues that humanity is fundamentally too dangerous, that their capacity for violence cannot be reconciled with civilized values, that integrating them would change us in ways we cannot predict. She paused, her colors shifting through complex patterns that expressed deep uncertainty. "Both sides are correct," she concluded. "And that is the problem across the galaxy." Her assessment was echoed in countless debates. But while politicians argued, the military had already made their decision. Defense academies began studying human tactics, analyzing every second of combat footage from the Swarm War. As scholars now called it, "Notice how the humans coordinate small unit actions without waiting for higher command," instructed Commander Vrelt at the Central Military Academy. Showing footage of Marines fighting through the Hive complex, they empower individual soldiers to make tactical decisions, creating a flexible response that adapts faster than any centralized command structure. "This contradicts established doctrine." A student objected. "Established doctrine failed against the swarm," Vrelt replied bluntly. "Human doctrine succeeded. That is what matters." Shipyards across Council space began implementing what engineers called Deathworlder design principles: redundant systems, armor plating, weapons optimized for damage over efficiency. "The humans build their ships expecting to take damage," explained Chief Engineer Morton to the Shipwright Guild. "Every critical system has backups. Every hull section can be sealed independently. Their vessels are designed to keep fighting even when catastrophically damaged. This increases mass and reduces efficiency." Someone pointed out, "It also means their ships survive battles that would destroy ours." Morton countered, "Efficiency means nothing if you're dead." The term human style entered the galactic lexicon, used to describe any approach that prioritized raw effectiveness over elegant efficiency. And slowly, it became less of an insult and more of a practical description. But it was Dr. Gentle's final report that truly captured what had happened. A comprehensive analysis she titled "The Deathworlder Paradox." "Humanity represents a fundamental paradox," she wrote. "They are capable of extraordinary violence, but also extraordinary compassion. They will burn entire cities to save innocent lives. They will fight to the death for people they have never met." During my time observing human Marines, I witnessed acts of brutality that horrified me. But I also witnessed acts of kindness that moved me to tears. She included specific examples: Marines sharing their rations with rescued civilians, despite being on short supplies themselves; medics treating wounded swarm creatures with the same care they gave their own people; soldiers adopting orphaned children from liberated worlds. The humans who burned the Hive with flamethrowers were the same humans who spent their off-duty time building shelters for refugees. They contain multitudes in ways that challenge our understanding of sentient psychology. Most disturbing and most hopeful," she concluded, "is the realization that they chose to help us. They came not because they wanted something from us, or because they were forced to, but because we asked, and that was enough. They are dangerous. Yes, but they are dangerous on our behalf. And perhaps that is what civilization needs, someone willing to do the terrible things that keep everyone else safe. Her report circulated widely and began shifting public opinion. But the real change came from an unexpected source. The survivors of the swarm invasion began speaking out. Giving interviews and testimony about what they had experienced, I watched the sky burn as the swarm consumed my city, said one Keshan civilian. A being whose species communicated through bioluminescent patterns. I thought I would die. Everyone I knew would die. And then the humans came. They were terrifying, the civilian continued. But they were terrifying to the swarm, not to us. They fought like demons, but they treated us with gentleness. I did not expect a human Marine carried my child to safety while under fire, another survivor reported. She was wounded, bleeding from multiple injuries. But she never put my child down until they reached the evacuation zone. The stories multiplied, thousands of them, each adding nuance to the simple narrative of humans as either saviors or monsters they sang while they fought. A soldier who had fought alongside humans reported with awe ancient war songs from their history, and somehow it made the fear less. Knowing they had done this before and survived on Earth, humanity watched the galactic debates with mixed feelings. They still don't trust us, Admiral Vasquez observed during a command briefing. But at least some of them are trying to understand us. Is that enough? Asked General Martinez. The head of the Human Defense Council, it's a start, Vasquez replied. Integration will take time, maybe generations. But the door is open now in ways it wasn't before. And if the swarm returns before they're ready, Vasquez pulled up a tactical display showing human fleet deployments along the edge of the Sol exclusion zone. Then we do what we always do, she said simply. We fight the months past, and the galaxy slowly adapted to its new reality. Some species began tentative outreach to humanity, requesting military advisors or technical consultants, always carefully supervised and limited in scope. Others worked to strengthen the exclusion zone, pushing for regulations that would keep humanity contained, even as they acknowledged the need might arise for human intervention. Earth responded with patience, neither pushing for integration nor accepting permanent isolation, simply being available if needed. And then 1 year after the swarm war ended, long-range sensors detected something that made every species in the galaxy freeze with terror. Massive spatial distortion in deep space, similar to the one that had heralded the swarm's first appearance, but orders of magnitude larger. Galactic Council convened an emergency session, and Admiral Vasquez received a priority communication before the formal request even went out there coming back. Council Prime stated without preamble, larger force, better organized. And they'll reach the outer colonies in 90 days. How many ships can you field? Vasquez asked. Every available vessel, Council Prime replied. But based on the sensor data, it won't be enough. There was a long pause before he continued. Admiral Vasquez. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I formally request military assistance from the United Earth Space Service. Acknowledged, Vasquez responded. How many ships do you need? As many as you can, Sen Vasquez smiled. And it was the smile of someone who had been preparing for exactly this moment. Council Prime. I can have 200 warships at your rally point in 3 weeks, she said. We've been building and training since we left. On the assumption that this was inevitable. 200, Council Prime repeated, his skin flushing with colors that might have been hope or might have been fear. You've built that many ships in 1 year. We're humans, Vasquez said simply. We prepare for war during peacetime. It's what we do. There's one condition, she continued. Name it this time. We fight as equals, Vasquez stated. No more quarantine. No more being treated as dangerous outsiders. Humanity joins the Council as a full member with all rights and responsibilities. Council Prime was silent for a long moment. And Vasquez knew he was consulting with representatives from 300 species. Agreed, he finally said. Though I suspect many will object, they'll get over it, Vasquez replied. Or they won't. But either way, the swarm is coming and we need to be ready. We're transmitting fleet coordination protocols now, she continued. All business, this'll be a combined operation. Human ships integrated with Council forces? We'll train together for 2 weeks before the swarm arrives, Admiral, Council Prime said quietly. Thank us after we win? Vasquez responded. The call ended, and Vasquez turned to her command crew. You heard the man, she said. Get me every ship, every marine, every asset we can deploy. This is what we've been preparing for. Fleet is already mobilizing, her executive officer reported. The call went out the moment the distortion was detected. Good, Vasquez said. Pulling up the strategic map and beginning to plan across Earth and its colonies. Humanity mobilized for war with the efficiency that came from never truly being at peace. Ships launched from orbital yards. Marines loaded onto transports. Supply chains activated to support a campaign that would determine the fate of the galaxy.